one thing I noticed when I was over at the Malibu house, that I was using I think the Audio Technica, the ATM50s or whatever, great headphones. But I had the white ones just because I thought they looked cool, so I got the white ones. And it turns out the white ones with the extra layer of paint or whatever's on them creak a little bit in the headphones. And it was the first time that I had to deal. So it's like somebody would be singing a soft song and turn their head slightly and hear just a little in there. And so I was going crazy with this vocal, editing those things out and finding alternate takes and all that. You were mentioning that recording Chris, there's like, he'll have chains, he'll be in a chair. Do you go even do you check that stuff at all? Do you try to get like a non-creaky chair? How do you deal with that chair? Because I imagine that's the main thing as a vocal engineer. You're hearing all these extra things, and some of it's cool. Like, the classic thing for that first got in my head about it was listen to those like late 2000s Lil Wayne mixtapes. You'd hear him light a blunt, you'd hear the lighter before every take, and you'd hear him in there with chains on. It's just like, that's the coolest thing ever. So sometimes it's great.
Yes, but I think in Wayne's place it's good because it's like, especially in rap, there's a lot more freedom. Like, if someone were to be like, oh, this rap record or this hip-hop record has a bunch of chains and shit, you'd be like, yeah, that's because I got all my fucking chains in the booth, bitch. So it's just like, they can definitely be played into. But with CB, it's more of like, you're talking about real, like, not real music, but like more professional music, like R&B singer, pop singer type of thing. So
that type layers of stuff, and layers of vocals.
Yeah, too. So the thought isn't, I got my chains in the studio, bitch. Like, that's not the thought that goes when you're doing R&B music or pop music. You know what I mean? So like with CB, what's cool is he doesn't like any breaths. So if you hear anything that after Heartbreak album, because the Heartbreak stuff was done by Jason and there's a bunch of breaths, but on my stuff, we cut all his breaths out completely.
Really?
There's no breathing when it comes to CB on his stuff. If you listen to like any of the stuff we've done recently, even Go Crazy and stuff like that, you won't really hear any breathing because we cut it all off, which is good because in those sections on the top and at the end of the line is where the creaks and the chains are. Basically, he'll finish a line, and when he finishes a line, because the microphone's here, he'll back up.
Some pro shit
he'll
right
finish
there.
the line and then back up. So after every line, you might hear a creak or something, but it'll be enough time for me to cut it.
Yeah.
It's about figuring that out. And there's been times where the S, let's say the S has a creak in it because he said the S and then he creaked back at the same time. Yep. So I'll find another S in the song that matches it and I'll replace it, just to make it perfect. Because I don't want people being like, man, there's creaking and chains and all this shit. Chris Brown, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and also it's a thing that I think is really important because there's a common thing that gets said, which is correct, which is, nobody who loves a record is listening to, the vast majority not listening to the quality of the snare drum, or people don't listen to the mix and go, what a great mix. But the flip side of that, of course, is that those are the things that bring out the record and bring out the song and bring out the aesthetic and make you cry or dance or whatever it is. And little creaks and little things, the listeners won't notice it, but they'll feel it. And those little things will be distracting. And if the S sounds wrong, it'll just make people's brain kind of do that for a second and it's not as good. So I think it's good to hear that you, I think a lot of people, we're going in and we're making sure every S is correct and making sure that everything sounds clean and even, and you're pulling S's from different parts of the song for the same thing in the same spot so it sounds even. I think people don't take the time to do that often. They think like, oh, maybe that's cheating or maybe I shouldn't do that or whatever, but that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, it's a huge part of it. And like with the Gunna stuff, I especially got it because they record in the booth inside the control room. Right. So there was you wouldn't have chains and so you'd have people talking, cell phones going off, doors being opened in the back, like all this type of shit. And sometimes there was just nothing you could do. Like if you tried to RX it, sometimes it would work to get it out, but you now have the vocal sounds a little warbly or stretched or something's wrong with it. And it's not worth, I'd rather have the creak in there and be like, yeah, they was just fucking around than to be like, yeah, I RX'd it and it sounds bad. You know what I mean? So I'd rather just have it. And some stuff, especially with the Gunna stuff, no one's going to notice or care. You know what I mean? One of the biggest things that I notice that happens all the time, and it drives me absolutely crazy, is when they record the record and there's no drops or there's no breakdown parts. So the hi-hat's playing on it's going back into the microphone. And then in the record, you do a drop or you do a beat part where the drums
and you hear that
out and you always hear the fucking hi-hat. And that's like absolutely the worst.
It's the worst, and of course I notice it every time now. I mean, I first started really noticing it on the Metro Boomin records, I think with 21 Savage, because it sounds like he just, especially those early records, he would just let the beats run for 10 minutes, and Savage would just do a bunch of ideas, and then Metro would go back and arrange the song. He's like, this is the hook, do this, and a lot of that you hear everything taken out, and you just hear that, you hear the beat in the background a little bit.
Yeah, that took me. I mean, like some people might be like, "Oh, that's cool," because, like you were saying, they might be like, "Oh, that's that part of that record that I remember," or whatever. But for us as engineers, that's like the ultimate, like, "Oh, hell no! What the fuck are we gonna do?" You know what I mean? So it's got to be. It's two perspectives, and I understand the other perspective. But if I can just do my best to get as much of it out, whatever's left in there can be left for the vibes. You know what I mean? But I'm definitely not gonna have breaths that are half cut, and it's, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a little bit unprofessional. To be honest, on Chris's demos, like a lot of people might think that the demos that I have with CB, meaning like after we record and then I just bounce it, like that for some reason sounds amazing, and it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like it's the beat obviously is not hitting as hard as it should. That's to start with. The vocals are on top of the music instead of being in it. And that's mostly so that Chris can really hear his vocal, because he loves to hear his vocal loud. But once I mix it, I start to bring the music up and the vocal down, and start to get it to sound like what you would hear when you hear a record out. But for the most part, like, to me, the demos are unlistenable. Obviously, for everyone else, they're listenable. But I would be like, man, I need to mix this right fucking now.